Freedom of political speech is one of the most important rights protected under the First Amendment. In a true democracy, people must be allowed to state political views and spread political opinion. Freedom of speech allows all of us to stand up and be counted, to be an active player in this democracy, not a passive spectator. However, free speech must have limits. The government maintains the right to arrest people who spread violent or hateful propaganda that could lead to crime or terrorism. The Patriot Act states it is a crime for any American to provide material support to any organization designated a terrorist group by Secretary of State. The PKK has been helping terrorists develop peacemaking skills, and this not only includes weapons, money, or bomb-making skills, but also includes providing any sort of expert advice or training. And the PKK has been helping them develop peacemaking skills, and training terrorists could put America at risk. So clearly, this example is a necessary limit on our First Amendment rights to free speech. My next example involves the Ku Klux Klan, otherwise known as KKK, who is an extreme group that has a history of harming African Americans, Jews, Catholics, homosexuals, and immigrants. In 1969, Clarence Brandenburg made a speech referring to revenge against Jews and African Americans, encouraging crowds to act violently against these ethnic groups. The Brandenburg also encouraged crowds to overthrow the government in a march on Washington, D.C., which would take place on July 4th. These examples are not only hateful speech, but are also an incite to violence, as they are pushing people to act in violent ways. Brandenburg was charged with advocating violence, and it was found that his means of accomplishing political reform used unlawful methods of terrorism. My last example of appropriate limitations to free speech is found in the landmark case of Schenck versus U.S. in 1919. In this case, Schenck was involved in many anti-war activities, including a mailing of about 150,000 leaflets urging draftees and soldiers to resist the draft. Schenck was sentenced to prison for violating the Espionage Act, which punished citizens for circulating false statements intended to interfere with the war effort. With this act, any effort to cause unrest in the military or to interfere with the draft were forbidden. No person, the Supreme Court ruled, can use free speech to place others in danger. And in a time of war, protected political speech is diminished. Imagine your own loved one fighting for our country and be thankful that our government feels they deserve protection. Throughout history, political speech has been considered the most valuable form of speech, and as a result, it has been provided the most protection. This has kept the democracy of the United States strong. However, according to the Freedom Forum organization, legal systems and society at large recognize limits on the freedom of speech, particularly when freedom of speech conflicts with other values or rights. Limitations to freedom of speech may follow the harm principle, the offense principle, or the incite to violence principle. These principles have been established to allow Americans to live in a peaceful society, not one of chaos. A society where it is not legal to counsel terrorists and their evil schemes, where groups such as the KKK are not given the chance to start violence against innocent ethnic groups, and where we support American soldiers, even if we do not agree with the war. There will always be debate about a citizen's right to freedom of speech, and I think that is healthy for America. But thankfully, for our own protection, there is a limit to the amount of freedom the government will ultimately allow.
Wait a second. I have a question. Can I?
Yeah, you go.
So, do you think that unpopular speech should be protected or like censored by the government? Like unpopular speech.
Unpopular speech?
You know, like when, like, do you know what an unpopular speech is?
Inform me.
Okay, it's like when a person will, like during the war, like anti-war kind of is unpopular speech. It's like.
Well,
Yeah.
as I said, during wartime.
No, like any issue, pretty much, like slavery, like anything.
But yeah, I know. But as I said, during wartime, protected political speech is diminished. So people can't say that unpopular speech is. You can't say stuff like that.
So basically what you're saying is during the wartime, we should all allow ourselves to be manipulated
by the government, right?
You can't. I'm not saying
we are being manipulated.
No, I'm saying that it should be censored.
No, your example.
So we're only allowed to say what we want when the government says we can.
Which is being manipulated.
It's so that facts during the war don't get leaked out to other countries. You know, before or after the war, you can say whatever you want, as long as it's censored by the government.
Yeah, so the government censors by the government, which means the government decides what they think is okay for the people
No,
to read.
the government
Which
steps
means
in.
that they just do it for themselves.
No, the government
Obviously,
steps in
and everyone
when
else-
it leads to when it is an incite to violence or the offense principle or if it is harming an American citizen or a citizen in general. That is when people step in.
That's when the government. Are you sure? Because. Okay.
Okay.
Like your example about the draft, saying that some man sent a draft saying that like we shouldn't go to the war if you don't want to. But in that Indian speech, I just said that we're all Americans, so we should all support.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
what? No, if
So
you're
you sh-
if you were sending leaflets out urging draftees not to attend war,
Why-
then
why should- they
the
have to-
other men out there, they will die. You're putting their lives at risk.
And you're putting these people's lives at risk as well. They don't even have a choice. They're being forced to war,
No.
forced to risk their lives
No.
for the United
No.
States, and they have no opinion in it because the government's manipulating everyone in the country.
No, during World War I, they had a choice. The government expected people to go to draft themselves
Okay, they
and
had
go
a
to war.
So then why is these leaflets so...
They still have a choice. And you know what? If you were in war and your term was almost up and there was no one else to back you up, you would have to stay out there and you could possibly die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of sucks.
Yeah, it
So
would suck.
I would
It
go
would suck
home.
majorly. And then your loved ones sitting at house are just praying for you to come home.
But the government forced you to go into war.
Yeah.
No, you have a choice.
But so the draft, you're saying you have a choice. You can say, no, I do not want to go to war. When there's a draft, and the draft is 17, and
When
you
you
want,
dra-
I
when
thought
you're
the draft
chosen
was
for the
17 or
draft,
older,
you
you
go.
have to go to war. Pretty sure that was a draft.
Time.
I don't know.
Answer the question.